Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me. You are always most welcome. So today I did promise you 2 or 3 weeks ago, probably maybe a month ago now, but we were talking about the Falklands War, and I did promise that I had one more book to look at, and it is Harrier FRS.1 versus the Mirage III Dagger. Now it's one of these sort of reference type books, and it's actually published by Osprey, a bit like the other one that we saw, which was Christopher Chant's Air War in the Falklands. Now when it arrived, I thought it's a bit thinner, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be a bit underwhelmed by this. You know, it's going to be just a few photographs and a bit of chit chat and stuff we already know. But actually, there is a bit more to it. I'm very pleased to say that it takes a completely totally different line than the others. One of the chaps who's involved, Pablo Calcaterra, I'll try and get it right. I think he was actually involved. Now, I've not read the book fully, but it's one of those books you pick up and you read the odd chapter and then you go back and then you... So I haven't quite got to the end of it, but what I can tell you is that it's worth having a quick chat about it. It does have a different style to the Christopher Chant book, which is more of a general historical reference. It shows this is very modeller friendly, I think, because it shows these colour plates with the various markings and the different aircraft used by both sides. It also sort of tells the historical story of the conflict over the 10 weeks it went on. With this book, though, it goes a completely different angle, and it tells it more from the pilot's perspective. So it's a little bit in keeping with the sort of Sharkey Ward / Dave Morgan books that we've already talked about in my previous book reviews, when I did the review of Sharkey Ward's Sea Harrier over the Falklands, Dave Ward's Hostile Skies, and of course Harrier 809, which was by Roland White. This one takes it a little bit of a different angle, so let's have a quick look. I'll zoom you in and you can have a little bit of a nose here, just a quick review, give you a bit of a flavour for it really. So, what it basically does is it sort of gets into a bit more detail about the tactics and some of the lesser known personalities, a bit of history, comes in with the Sea Harrier, tells you about the big events, and it's like a diary of the major events during the conflict and leading up to it. Then we've got Mirage 3, EA, the development of the Mirage, of course how the French developed this in the 60s, and then of course improved on it, sold it to the Israelis and it became the Dagger A, and then you've got the sort of Harrier becoming the Sea Harrier, and some nice illustrations I have to say in here. Then we've got the technical specs. It's quite a detailed book, this. It goes into, you know, a lot more sort of specific. It's very much more specific about these two types of plane. Talking about the different missiles that they're carrying. Here we go. Typical missile loadout for the Mirage 3. And the Dagger. The Dagger cannon pack. Explains how that all works. It's rotary cannon underneath the air intakes. It's the DEFA 30mm revolver cannon, they call it. 125 rounds carried on each side, and the ammunition is carried in a ventral tray. Muzzles are underneath the engine intakes. Actually quite a good design, it seems to me, to be honest. I always liked the Mirage 3, I've got to say. I was always a big fan of it. I used to watch that TV programme, which some of you, if you're well over 50, may recall, a programme called the Le Chevaux de Selle, which is basically translated, not correctly, but translated in English as the Aeronauts. It used to be kind of aimed at children, really, but it was a sort of children's... It was put on during children's holidays. I remember I used to watch it on a Wednesday morning, I think it was, or a Tuesday morning, during the August summer holidays. And it was about these two French pilots who could join this Mirage 3 squadron somewhere in the central southern France. It's very interesting. You can see it on YouTube. Is it called the Chevaux de Ciel? I know the translation is not the same as the Aeronauts. It's not the same. My French is a bit rusty these days. But anyway, if any French viewers amongst you, and there will be, perhaps you can tell us in the comments. Anyway, back to the book. So we've got the Sea Harrier here. Sorry, I was saying how much I like the Mirage 3 right up until the Falklands, I did. But no, because the Israelis used it so effectively in the 6-Day War in 1967, in June 67. Remarkable what they achieved with the aircraft and showed it to its true potential. So I can understand why Argentina wanted it. Maybe some of their tactics weren't so good, but we'll get into that in a minute. I'll show you a bit more. So, Sea Harrier FRS.1, the first iteration of the Sea Harrier. Here it is launching off HMS Invincible. Here. And this is basically saying this was the fleet air defence of the Royal Navy for the last the last 2 decades of the 20th century. Now we start to talk about the Harrier's armament, and here we've got the Raytheon, American Raytheon AIM 9L Lima Sidewinder, which was very, very effective indeed. Had this very advanced seeker head, much better than its predecessor. And of course the Aden 30mm twin cannons underneath there, right in the centre of the lower fuselage, which is like a cannon pack. And they used these also in the Lightning, didn't they? I think it's a single one, the Lightning. And that was in the ventral pack underneath. But he goes into the details here about, it's quite useful, this book. It's not so much a modeller's book, it's more of a historical reference. There's a lot of interesting stuff you'll find that, little things you didn't know. And it does the complete side-by-side comparison here about everything, wingspan, weight, height, speed, etc. So it's quite useful in that respect. And then it talks about strategy, and this is where it really diverges quite a lot. They talk about the different approaches of both the Argentine side and the British side, and I think the real value of this book, which is, I say, it's a bit of a diminutive little book, and as I when I opened it I was not very hopeful. I thought it was more of the same, but it isn't, because it tells a lot more about the Argentines' tactics, for example. It explains them in quite a lot of detail, and then it goes to explain the British tactics in the air-to-air combat with each other. Talking here about the exclusion zone, and then it's also explaining about how the tactics in the actual fight develops and changed. And again, it puts you in the cockpit. Look at this, it's got the actual cockpit of the Sea Harrier here with all the detail that you need to know. There we go. And you can see there you've got your Blue Fox radar display, which is the big square screen on the right. A bit more. There we go. Yeah, and it really does explain all the instruments, all the controls, a lot of detail there. And then it talks about the same situation, the training, and then the cockpit of the Mirage III Dagger. And the Dagger cockpit. Now they did not have such an advanced radar. I think this is what let them down a little bit. But of course they did have AW, Airborne Early Warning. So you could argue that it wasn't as critical for it to have something like Blue Fox anyway. And of course Blue Fox was very much developed for naval aircraft by Ferranti in the UK. Now this is where this book I think really comes into its own. It's talking about Sea Harrier tactics and then Dagger tactics. And it's talked about a great deal. I didn't go into a lot of detail myself when I was doing the review of the Sharkey Ward book. But here is exactly what Sharkey Ward talked about in some depth in the book itself. And there's a nice diagram here showing you, I think it's the hook manoeuvre they're going to talk about here, which Sharkey Ward was a big fan of. And it says, pair of SHARs, Sea Harriers, they fly 800 yards abreast, and then as soon as they pick up a radar trace of a potential bogey, they split apart. So start here, and then they split apart, and then the starboard wingman does this hook manoeuvre. So the commander, the left side, which probably is Sharkey Ward, he does a head-on attack and splits straight through the middle of the Mirages, and his colleague then goes around behind them. So if you've taken one down, that's fine, and if you haven't, you're going to get the second one by coming in behind him, which is quite a useful tactic, obviously. And then it goes into some of the other characters that are involved, and we then have the Argentines' own tactics of how they were organising themselves. They had a sort of a shorter 500-metre spacing, but they weren't so adept at dogfighting, I don't think, and of course they didn't have the more advanced Lima Sidewinder rocket anyway, missile that was such a powerful air-to-air tool. So yeah, that was a big differentiator between the two. Got Dave Smith here. Dave Smith was in 801 Squadron, I think, right? No, 800, sorry. So he was on Hermes with he was with Dave Morgan. And then you've got Guillermo Adolfo Donadillo, who's a guy from Argentina who's one of the Dagger pilots, and he's a very interesting story here. And he's called him Poncho, that was his nickname. Don't know whether he was going around like Clint Eastwood or what, but yeah, it's very interesting. And then it goes into the combat and what actually happened and the various sort of missions. Some good photographs. Again, you've got some. Is that Mike Watson? Serpy Watson, yeah, he's an ATEL one. He's one of Sharky Ward's colleagues. And then you've got just more photos and a lot of detail. A lot of detail. Says here, post-conflict examination of the wreckage of one of the Mirage III's. And it says here, revealed 2 errors in previous written histories, because one of them they thought it had been intercepted and there was no damage as they actually thought, as was previously believed. And of course you find that out a lot with these conflicts. And then we've got HMS Glamorgan. Glamorgan was very unlucky at the end of the conflict. This is the ship that got hit by the land-based Exocet in the last couple of days of the war, fired from near Port Stanley. From the battery on the coast, and I incorrectly, somebody pointed out my slip of the tongue with my Welsh names. I think I said in my review, I said HMS Cardiff, and it was of course this one, HMS Glamorgan. And then you've got the guys who, this is the Torno flight guys from Argentina, and these are the guys who attacked the Arrow, Alacrity and the Glamorgan, sort of mid-conflict. And then we go on with just various details really, but there's some good maps, there's some very good photos. A picture there is that the Ardent, is it? Yes, HMS Ardent, in a bad way obviously before she sank. Attacked by the Libra flight from the Skyhawks from the mainland of Argentina. And here's Sharky Ward of course, and he is the guy who intercepted the Raton flight, and of course he's credited with obviously shooting down the Pucara and the Hercules, and he also shot down a camera, I believe. Here's a very interesting photograph here. It says here, incredibly, although their daggers were all destroyed by Sharky Ward and Thomas, Sen, Donadil and Puma survived the experience of getting shot down in combat. This photograph was taken shortly after the war and captures the only flight that was shot down by Sea Harriers where all of the pilots actually survived. So that was lucky for those guys, wasn't it? Very lucky. And here's a shot of one of the daggers just flying over HMS Belvedere. And then we've got some rather nice artwork, which I'll zoom out for this. Rather nice artwork here. The Sea Harriers engaging the daggers. One's just gone into the sea, the other one's about to do the same. I think he's just got a sidewinder coming up behind him. And talking here about engaging the enemy and how you set up your weapon system for the sidewinder using the hood. Very interesting, I've got to say. It does give a different perspective. I like the way it's sort of puts you in the seat of the combat fighter pilot, this one, and yeah. And then there's a lot of statistics and analysis at the end, with the help of the Argentines, obviously, who helped write the book. So yeah, I think it's a really excellent book. It wasn't very expensive, this one. I think it was about, what does it cost me? About £18, I think, top of my head. And then, yeah, that's kind of it, really, I guess. So it's not a very big book. I wish it had been bigger. I think they could have made it maybe a few more photographs. They could have. It does feel a bit lightweight, But I wouldn't say it's better or worse than the Christopher Champ book. I think that it's just interesting because it goes into much more of the what it's like to be an Argentine pilot, what it's like to actually be a Sea Harrier pilot. Puts you behind the instruments, puts you in the cockpit, explains what weapon systems it's got and how they operate. Very interesting bit of literature, so I would recommend that to you. I'd sort of give that a sort of 8. I haven't read it completely, so I'll go. You can take this to the pinch of salt. I'd say 8.5 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Could have been a bit thicker, but I think it's very, very good. I think they both are. If you're really keen on the Sea Harrier, obviously I've still not made much progress in mine because I've got this problem with my arm. Every time I use anything, like jet wash, trigger, or gripping anything, I get this pain in my right arm. It's a problem with the cutters and kills your mojo a little bit, but I'm still keen to build this, and I will build it. I assure you, it will happen. It's just a matter of feeling a bit better with the bad arm, Somebody made a comment to me a few days ago and said, "Oh, you got this black glove on. You've got this bad hand. It's a mechanical hand, isn't it? You're like Luke Skywalker. Somebody's cut your hand off." No, it's real hand. It's real hand. Some of these books I'm handling doing these reviews are not mine. So there we go. I've got another book review. Two more book reviews. One is for the. I'll give you a quick trailer. Stealth Bomber book review. And I've also got the American X-15 hypersonic plane, mishap plane, we'll call it, rocket plane, world record breaker, of course. So I'll be doing those very shortly. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the very near future. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more of these similar videos, and if you have already, ding the notification bell to get early warning about the ones that are going to be coming up in the near future. Until next time, thanks a lot for joining me. Cheers, take care of yourselves, and bye for now.